That was the question Robert Baratheon never got to ask, because by the time he reached the Red Keep, sword still bloody from the final battle at the Trident, the Iron Throne already had a new king, Ned Stark, and the doors to the throne room were sealed shut, guarded by men not sworn to House Baratheon. But to House Stark, nobody expected the wolf to bite, but it did. And the bite was deep. At first it was whispered disbelief. The Northman? The quiet one, the man who lectured on honor while others bled for it. But the banners told a different story. The direwolf flew over the Red Keep. The stag had bled out at the gates. And Robert, wounded and betrayed, stood in the ashes of his rebellion, watching as his oldest friend sat where Aerys once did. Rhaegar is dead, Ned had said. The war is over, but peace needs a different kind of king. Peace, that was the word Ned clung to as he ordered the arrest of Tywin Lannister, whose troops had just sacked the city. That was the word he used when he commanded that Elia Martell's children be given a proper burial. That was the word he muttered again and again, as Robert's howls of betrayal echoed down the halls of the Red Keep. But peace was never what this war was about. Robert's rebellion was personal. His vengeance for Lyanna Stark had morphed into a campaign of blood. And now the very man who'd helped him win it had taken everything. For the sake of honor. For the realm. For peace, and Robert would never forgive him. Ned Stark's first days as king were quiet. Too quiet. The small council was fractured. Jon Arryn had refused to serve. Stannis Baratheon stormed back to Dragonstone, vowing never to kneel to a traitor. Renly fled to Storm's End, too young to be a threat but too proud to stay, and Robert vanished. Some said he took a ship to Essos, others claimed he was gathering an army. But Ned knew better. He'd known that rage too long, too intimately. Robert would never forgive betrayal, especially not from a brother-in-arms. Yet Ned did not regret his choice. Rhaegar had died, Aerys had burned, and the capital was at the mercy of the Lannisters. Ned couldn't stomach watching Tywin climb the steps to the throne, or worse, see Robert sit there drunk on power and grief. No, the realm needed healing. It needed stability, and so for once the man who never wanted power took it. But power doesn't bend to quiet hearts. It eats them. Sansa Stark was brought to court as princess of the realm. Catelyn watched her daughter walk beside kings and knew what would come. Betrothal offers, suitors with daggers behind their smiles. Arya kicked and screamed when she was told she would remain in the north. Bran asked why Uncle Benjen stopped writing from the wall. Robb rode to King's Landing on his father's order to learn how to be heir to a throne built on fire. Littlefinger returned to court with that same smirk, sniffing out cracks in the new regime. Varys simply called Ned's decision unexpected but promising. The realm, he said, needed a king without ambition, but even the spider knew better. Kings without ambition rarely live long. In Dawn, Oberyn Martell cursed Ned Stark's name. "Peace!" he spat. Where was peace when my sister's children were slaughtered like dogs? The Martells refused to recognize the new king. So did the Tyrells, whose alliance had been with House Baratheon. The Vale remained cold. The Reach remained distant. Only the Riverlands, bound to House Stark by marriage, offered full-throated loyalty. The realm was more fragile than it looked, but it held. For now. Ned's first act was to abolish the titles granted to the Lannisters. Tywin's crimes, unpunished under Robert's reign, were tried publicly. Gregor Clegane was sentenced to death. Sir Amory Lorch hanged. Jaime Lannister was stripped of his white cloak. Imprisoned in the dungeons beneath the Red Keep, Cersei had vanished. With her children. They were never Robert's anyway, Varys whispered. Say truth better buried, don't you think? Ned disagreed. Truth mattered. Even if it bled, but truth didn't fill bellies. It didn't rebuild cities. It didn't stop the Iron Islands from raiding Lannisport in revenge. It didn't stop Tywin's bannermen from rallying at Casterly Rock. It didn't stop whispers of rebellion from echoing across the narrow sea, where Viserys Targaryen now styled himself the true king, and it certainly didn't stop the letter, a single raven. From the wall, Benjen Stark had gone missing, and beyond the wall wild things stirred. Ned read the letter alone late into the night. He stared at the flickering candle and wondered if he'd made the right choice. If Lyanna's death had broken something in Robert that could never be repaired, or if, perhaps it had broken something in him too. And in the east, across the sea, a silver-haired girl whispered her brother's name. Daenerys Stormborn had survived. She was watching, waiting. She was watching, waiting. The silence that came after Ned Stark's coronation didn't last long. Peace, it turned out, was just the eye of the storm. In the north, the lords who once thought of Ned as a quiet warden now whispered about what it meant to have a Stark on the throne. For centuries, the north had knelt to southern kings. Now one of their own sat the Iron Throne, and many believed it was time the south finally bent the knee. Lord Karstark raised his voice first. "Why should we fight the Lannisters' war or Dorne's war? Let them come to us. Let the north rule its own and leave the rest to the wolves." But Ned had no interest in ruling from Winterfell. He remained in King's Landing, surrounded by vipers, trying to hold together a realm that was breaking at the seams. He sent ravens to appease the Tyrells, pardoned some of the less guilty Lannister retainers, and even offered marriage alliances through Robb and Sansa. But the realm didn't want honor. It wanted vengeance. It wanted blood, and blood was coming. From the Stormlands, Stannis Baratheon sent a cold and formal letter. "I do not acknowledge your kingship. The throne is not yours. You will be judged." Ned knew that tone well. Stannis would not forget Robert. He would not bend, and he would not stop. From Dragonstone, Stannis began gathering ships, not for trade. For war then came the second raven, from the Vale. Jon Arryn was dead, poisoned. Some said it was his wife, Lysa Tully, mad with grief and suspicion. Others whispered of darker hands, ones that had already poisoned kings and would do it again. But the truth was buried under layers of lies. Ned was left with one more ally dead, and one more kingdom that would not ride for him. The Lords Declarant of the Vale refused to support the Iron Throne, claiming neutrality under the name of young Robin Arryn. In truth, they feared rebellion more than they trusted Ned Stark, and rebellion was exactly what was coming. Meanwhile, in the east, the exiled Prince Viserys Targaryen had finally sold his sister to Khal Drogo in exchange for an army. Daenerys was quiet at first, obedient to her brother's ambition, but marriage changed her. Fire woke something inside her. She was no longer a pawn. She was becoming something more. She spoke to her blood riders in Dothraki, not the common tongue. She walked into fire without fear, and in her belly a new Targaryen grew, one meant for the Iron Throne, but her vengeance was not for Robert Baratheon now. It was for the Northmen who betrayed both crown and rebellion, the man who stole the war from everyone and wore honor like armor. Daenerys Targaryen began to see the Iron Throne not just as her birthright, but as justice, and the dragons were beginning to stir. In the shadows of the Red Keep, Varys watched it all unfold. He had survived kings, queens, and tyrants. He would survive Ned Stark too. But even he knew, this was not a reign built to last. "You can't keep peace with parchment and good intentions," he told Ned one night. "You need loyalty and fear." Ned ignored him, so Varys began to whisper elsewhere. He wasn't the only one. Littlefinger, ever smiling, began cozying up to disgruntled bannermen. He told them tales, how the North was bleeding for the South again, how the Riverlands sent sons to die for a crown they'd never wear, how Ned Stark, the man of honor, had done the most dishonorable thing imaginable, and the worst part, he made them believe it. At court, Robb Stark struggled under the weight of expectation. His father kept him close, hoping to teach him rule. But every decision was criticized, every gesture seen as arrogance or naivety. The Southern Lords mocked his northern manners. The Maesters questioned his readiness, and Robb began to change. He learned to lie without blinking. He learned when to nod and when to remain silent. And he learned that the Iron Throne had no friends, only flatterers, spies, and corpses, but he also learned to hate it. "I don't want this," he told Arya in a stolen moment. "This isn't ours," Arya just shrugged. "Then why don't we give it back?" It was a child's question. But it wasn't wrong. Tension boiled over when news came from the Westerlands. Tywin Lannister was dead, poisoned in his sleep. No suspects, no answers. Jaime, still imprisoned, refused to speak. Cersei remained missing, and the Gold Cloak suspected an inside job. Without Tywin, House Lannister fractured. Kevan tried to hold it together, but the bannermen began to desert. Some joined the Baratheons, others the Tyrells. Some whispered that Casterly Rock would never be ruled again by lions, and yet something darker crept beneath all of this, something old, something cold. From the north came the third raven. The dead were walking. Ned held the letter in trembling hands. Benjen was still missing. Rangers were vanishing, and the wildlings spoke of white shadows in the woods. He tried to raise the court's attention. No one listened. They thought it was northern, superstition, fear-mongering, desperation, but Ned had seen too much. He knew fear when it whispered, and he knew winter was coming. He knew winter was coming. Whispers of rebellion turned into roars. The banners were rising, not for Ned Stark, not even for a new king, but against the very idea of one man ruling them all. The Seven Kingdoms had grown tired of unity, especially under a wolf wearing a crown. From Storm's End, Stannis Baratheon declared himself king, not in secret, not in fear, but boldly. In ink and blood, the throne belongs to me by right of law and blood. Eddard Stark is no king. He is a usurper cloaked in righteousness. Stannis sent his letters everywhere, to lords big and small, to maesters, to minor houses that remembered Robert's fury and trusted Stannis's cold sense of order. And many listened, because whatever people said of Stannis Baratheon, they knew this. He would not lie, he would not bend, and he would never stop. Ned received the raven in silence. His council argued, of course. Littlefinger advised striking first. Renly Baratheon, now returned from exile and cloaked in gold and charisma, offered a very different path. "Let me be king," Renly said with a grin that could charm stone. "The people love me. They'll follow me. I'll keep your daughter as my queen and your son as Warden of the North. That's a better future than your Stark honor can give them." Ned refused. He didn't even let Renly finish the pitch. The realm didn't need more crowns. It needed one, worn with duty, not ambition. Renly vanished from court that night, and the next morning, another raven came. Renly had crowned himself king. The realm was splitting fast, 3 kings, and none of them Targaryens. In the north, the Karstarks and Umbers called for independence. Let the south burn. We should never have gone south in the first place. Robb tried to reason with them, but it was clear. Without his father, the north was slipping. The Riverlands were no better. Edmure Tully's pride made him easy prey for Littlefinger's whispers. Lord Frey, insulted over his exclusion from court affairs, blocked key trade routes from the twins. Riverrun began to act like a kingdom unto itself, and all the while, Ned Stark clung to the crown. Each day it grew heavier. Each day he trusted fewer people. In the east, Daenerys Targaryen's baby was born under the light of a blood moon. He didn't cry when he entered the world, he roared. The Dothraki believed it was a sign, a Khal who would unite the world. Drogo named him Rhaego, but Daenerys called him the Fire Reborn, and behind her, 3 petrified dragon eggs began to crack, slowly, quietly, but surely. Daenerys was no longer a pawn in her brother's game. Viserys had died screaming in the Dothraki Sea, molten gold sealing his ambition forever. Now the Khaleesi looked west, toward Westeros, toward the throne her family lost, toward the man who had helped destroy it, and then claimed it for himself. Ned Stark had made many enemies, but none would burn quite like her. In King's Landing, the capital itself began to rebel, not in swords but in spirit. Bread was scarce. Gold was scarcer. The city remembered Robert's victories, but Ned's rule. They only saw rationing, taxes, and quiet grief. He didn't parade. He didn't joke. He didn't drink. And he didn't give them joy, he gave them order. And order is a poor feast. The faith of the Seven began to stir again. The High Septon, once a puppet of power, now preached openly. A king who takes a crown not meant for him invites judgment, not blessing. Ned summoned him for counsel. The Septon refused. Power was slipping through his fingers. Arya Stark watched it all from the shadows of the Red Keep. She had grown wilder in the capital, more wolf than girl now. Her training began in secret, swordplay with Syrio Forel, a former First Sword of Braavos, who treated her not as a princess, but as a blade in the making. She hated the court. She hated the dresses, the lies, the smiles that hid knives. One night, she told Sansa, "This isn't our home." Sansa didn't answer, because she didn't know what home meant anymore. And far to the north, beyond the wall, a cold wind howled. Jon Snow had taken his vows. He stood atop the wall in black, watching the forest for shadows. But even from there, the world felt wrong. Birds flew strange. The trees whispered of things long dead, and the rangers were disappearing. When he asked Maester Aemon what it meant, the old man said only, "The long night is coming." And this time the world is not ready. Jon dreamed of his father, not Ned Stark, but the man who raised him. In the dream, Ned sat on the Iron Throne, but it melted beneath him. Turned to ice, turned to ash. Jon woke in sweat. He knew something was coming, something worse than rebellion. And still Ned tried. He met with lords. He signed decrees. He made offers of peace, marriages, and alliances. But each day another kingdom turned away. Each night he stared at the fire and wondered if it was worth it. He had taken the crown not out of greed, but because he feared what would happen if Robert took it. He feared what power would do to the realm. But now, as the banners of war rose across Westeros, he began to ask the question he'd buried deep. Was it truly better this way? Was a war against 3 kings with a crumbling realm better than watching Robert burn it all himself? Did he prevent ruin, or only delay it? Or only delay it? Snow fell in King's Landing for the first time in 100 years. It came early, carried by winds from the north, as if winter itself had decided to announce its rule before any man could. The small folk whispered that it was an omen, that the Starks had brought the cold with them, and that the realm was cursed under a wolf's reign. And in many ways, it was, because while the snowflakes landed soft upon the red roofs of the capital, the first war of Ned Stark's rule had already begun. Stannis Baratheon had set sail from Dragonstone. No ravens, no warning. Just sails black as coal and a fleet of disciplined men who believed utterly in their king's claim. They landed near Storm's End, reclaiming it with barely a drop of blood. The garrison surrendered the moment they saw Stannis step ashore. Ned had no time to respond, because 3 days later, Renly Baratheon, now calling himself the People's King, marched out of Highgarden with 20,000 Tyrell men at his back and a crown of gold roses on his head. 2 brothers. 2 kings, and neither one bent the knee. In the Red Keep, Ned stood over a map of Westeros, silent. Robb stood beside him, older in the face than in the eyes. He'd grown leaner since arriving, more hardened, more still. "We're surrounded," Robb said, tracing the Reach and Stormlands with his finger. "If they join forces, they could take the capital." "They won't," Ned said. "Stannis would never suffer Renly to rule." "But they don't need to rule," Robb replied. "They just need to burn." Ned looked at his son. In his face he saw both Catelyn's clarity and the stark cold. Robb was learning the truth of thrones. Honor has no place on them. Littlefinger, standing nearby with his usual smirk, leaned in. "We could strike first. Cut off the Tyrell supply lines. Starve them before they reach us." "No," Ned said firmly. "We do not make war on our own people." Varys stepped forward, voice soft. "Your Grace, with all due respect. They've already made war on you." Word came within a week. The first battle had been fought. At the Manda, Renly's host clashed with a Stark loyal bannerman from the Riverlands. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Lord Vance, sworn to House Tully, had tried to block Renly's advance. He and his sons were cut down. Their heads were sent to Riverrun in a box of Reach gold. Catelyn wept when she read the letter. Ned didn't speak. Robb clenched his jaw so tightly it bled. There was no honor now. Only war. In the north, word of the chaos spread quickly. Lord Karstark began raising his own banners, declaring that the north should declare independence, while the southern kingdoms tore each other apart. He called Ned's reign a betrayal of the old ways. "We were meant to be free," he said. "We bled for the south once." "Never again," Lady Mormont agreed. So did the Umbers, and in Winterfell, Maester Luwin sent a raven to Ned. "You are losing the north." Ned read it alone. Anne said nothing. He couldn't be everywhere. Couldn't hold everything. The Iron Throne gave no room for stillness. It gave no mercy. And now it gave no allies. But the war wasn't the only threat. Arya was gone. One morning she simply disappeared from the Red Keep. No note. No trail, no signs of forced entry. Her guard had been drugged. Her bed cold. And Syrio Forel was missing as well. Sansa collapsed when she heard the news. Robb demanded answers. Ned tore the keep apart brick by brick, but found nothing. Littlefinger offered sympathy laced with venom. Perhaps she grew tired of waiting for the wolves to wake up. But Ned knew Arya better than that. She wouldn't run. Not without purpose. Something had happened, and Varys confirmed it days later in a whisper. The girl was seen boarding a Braavosi ship. With the Dancing Master. Why? "She asked too many questions," Varys said, his eyes dark. "About names. About killing. About revenge. In the east, Daenerys Targaryen had begun her own war, not with armies but with blood. Her dragons had hatched, small at first, more shadow than flame, but growing by the day. She fed them raw meat with her own hands, whispering Valyrian lullabies to them. Drogo called her Mother of Mountains now, and even his fiercest blood riders bowed before her. She had become a queen, not in title, but in fire, and with her Khalasar she began the march west, through the Red Waste, toward ships, toward Westeros, the realm that had murdered her family, the throne that had been stolen from her, and the man who now sat on it. In the Night's Watch, Jon Snow began to see what the realm had forgotten. The dead were rising, small patrols vanished. Corpses returned with blue eyes. Ghost howled at shadows. Samwell Tarly found ancient texts that spoke of a time when winter lasted generations, and of the White Walkers who led armies of ice. Jon wrote to Ned. He begged for Ben's supplies, attention. He got silence in return because Ned never received the raven. The man tasked with delivering it was murdered. Found gutted in a brothel in Flea Bottom. The letter gone. Someone in the capital didn't want the crown looking north. They wanted it distracted. And it was. The Battle of Goldgrass broke the realm. Renly's forces reached the Reach Riverlands, border, and clashed with Stannis' vanguard. It was chaos, a storm in the fields. Wildfire, bought in secret by Renly's allies, turned the rivers into boiling green. Stannis lost half his men, but he didn't retreat, because at the end of the battle, Renly Baratheon was dead. A shadow was seen leaving his tent, a black thing that moved like smoke and vanished before it could be touched. Some said it was sorcery. Others claimed it was Stannis himself, cloaked in devilry, but either way Renly's body burned. And his army? It bent the knee to Stannis. It bent the knee to Stannis. King's Landing no longer slept. Every night horns blew from the city walls. Every morning more tents appeared across the Blackwater. The army of Stannis Baratheon had arrived, not limping, not broken, but silent and cold-eyed. Discipline marked every motion. Every soldier wore the fury of a man who'd bled for a cause now fully righteous. Renly was dead. The Tyrells had returned to Highgarden, licking their wounds and waiting to see which way the wind would blow next. But Stannis? He didn't wait. He never had, and now he came for the Iron Throne for Ned Stark. Inside the Red Keep the halls were colder than the snow falling outside. The small folk no longer whispered. They screamed. Riots broke out over bread. The gold cloaks cracked skulls for stealing turnips. Nobles locked their doors. Merchants fled. The city was a breath away from chaos. Ned stood before the small council, expression unreadable. "We can still negotiate," said Grandmaster Pycelle, sweat beading under his white beard. "Stannis is a man of reason." "Reason doesn't march with 20,000 men," Robb said. "He's here for blood." "Then give it to him," said Littlefinger, voice oily. "Kill him in the field. Strike before the siege begins." Varys only smiled, that quiet, sad smile of a man who already knew the answer. Ned spoke at last. "We'll not raise swords until we must. We send ravens again." A final offer. "He has no right to the throne. He has more right than we do," Robb cut in. The room froze, even Littlefinger blinked. Ned looked at his son, his heir, and saw not rebellion in his eyes, but something worse. Doubt. The raven was sent. It returned with a single word burned into the parchment. No. The siege began at dawn. Stannis' catapults hurled flaming stone into the city. The Blackwater Bay was sealed with ships. No food in, no trade, no escape. The people screamed in the streets, cursing the king who had once walked among them with too much honor and too little gold. And from the ramparts, Ned Stark watched them starve. The wolf had taken the throne for peace, and now he had delivered war. He turned from the walls and summoned Robb. "We ride tonight." The gates opened in the dead of night. 20,000 men poured from the capital, not in retreat but in fury. Stark banners flapped in the wind, snow gathering on armor as the North rode south one final time. This wasn't a battle for conquest. This was a fight to stop Stannis before he broke the walls and unleashed his fury on the people Ned had sworn to protect. Steel clashed before the sun rose. The battlefield outside King's Landing became a frozen graveyard. Ned met Stannis at the center. Not alone, but not hidden. For a moment, no swords moved. Just two men. Two friends once. I didn't want this, Ned said quietly. Stannis's eyes were ice. Then you shouldn't have taken what wasn't yours. The duel was never fair. Stannis was a seasoned warrior, and Ned, though still formidable, carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Their swords met once, twice, the third time. Stannis's blade bit into Ned's shoulder. Robb screamed from across the field. Then a horn blew from the north side of the battlefield. Everyone turned. The North had arrived, but not for Ned, Stark, Umber, Manderley, all flying their own banners, all charging not to aid the king, but to kill him. They had declared for no one, just against everyone. The battlefield descended into chaos. Northmen fighting Northmen, brothers killing brothers. Robb rode through the fray, trying to reach his father. His sword carved a path, but the snow was slick with blood, and somewhere in that chaos, Ned Stark fell. They pulled his body from beneath a mound of corpses. Robb held it in his arms, blood mixing with tears. He screamed so loud the ravens scattered from the trees. His father, his king, the man who had carried the realm on his back, not for power but to stop exactly this, and in dying, he had failed. The war didn't end. It exploded. Stannis pulled back from the battlefield, not in defeat but in calculation. He had seen what the North could do. He had seen Robb Stark's rage, and he knew the Iron Throne would be his, just not yet. He retreated to the Stormlands, regrouped, rebuilt, and waited. In the Red Keep, chaos reigned. Varys took control of the small council, placing bannermen he trusted, or at least those he could control. Littlefinger vanished in the night. Pycelle was found dead, poison on his lips, and Robb Stark sat the Iron Throne, not crowned, not named, just sitting, staring. Sansa stood beside him, her face pale. She touched his shoulder, but he didn't move. He had come to King's Landing as a boy. Now he was something else entirely. In the north, Winterfell had fallen. The Boltons rose in rebellion, seizing the castle while the Stark family bled in the south. Maester Luwin was hanged. Theon Greyjoy, who'd once been a warden brother to Robb, now wore a kraken on his chest and a blade in his hand. No one ruled the north, it ruled itself. With teeth and far beyond, across the narrow sea, Daenerys sailed at last. Dragons circled the ship, wings casting shadows across the waves. The Iron Throne had claimed another Stark. Now it would answer to fire. Now it would answer to fire. Robb Stark didn't crown himself. He didn't hold court. He didn't make speeches. He sat on the Iron Throne with his father's blood still on his cloak, and for 3 days he barely moved. No one dared ask him what came next. The gold cloaks waited in silence. The small council was nothing but ash and ghosts now. The nobles murmured behind locked doors. Westeros had seen kings drunk, mad, cruel, even cowardly, but never one this still, never one so young and already grieving. On the 4th day he spoke. "Send the North my father's bones," he told Varys. "Send them home." But home no longer waited. Winterfell was gone, smoke, rubble, a banner of flayed man's skin flapping where the direwolf once flew. Rose Bolton, ever quiet, ever cold, had betrayed the Starks without a whisper. He had opened the gates to the Ironborn, let Theon Greyjoy take the castle, then stabbed Theon in the back before he could warm the seat. Now, he ruled a burned ruin with leeches and knives, and a bastard called Ramsay who hunted girls in the woods for sport. The North was lost, and Robb had nothing left to send the bones to. From the Stormlands came another raven, this one not to Robb, but to the realm. Stannis Baratheon had declared a holy war. He'd embraced a foreign god. A red woman now stood at his side, her eyes burning like the sun at dusk, whispering of a prophecy. Azor Ahai returned. She called Stannis the Lord's chosen, and declared all others false kings. Her fires danced in the night, casting shadows across Stannis's camps. And those shadows moved. It was said that one of Renly's bannermen died choking on smoke inside a locked room. Another drowned. In his own tent, witchcraft, Varys said. Justice, Stannis wrote. The realm didn't know which to believe, but they feared both. In the east, Daenerys' fleet landed at Lys, the dragons circling above her ships like gods made flesh. At first, the city laughed. What could one girl do with 3 beasts the size of dogs? By the second night, they weren't laughing. By the third, Lys burned, not just a port, not just the nobles, the whole city, every house, every tower, every soul that hadn't fled. She left it behind in ash, and her banners flew red and black with wings. "Tell Westeros," she said. "I am coming home." And home. Westeros had turned to rot. The Reach still refused to commit. House Tyrell watched from the safety of Highgarden, stockpiling grain, refusing to choose between Robb and Stannis. The Vale remained silent. Young Lord Arryn locked away while his mother, Lisa, slipped deeper into paranoia and prayer. The Riverlands bled, attacked by Lannister loyalists still haunting the west, and torn apart by Freys who now rode for themselves. The twins had closed their gates to all but golden revenge. No king ruled. Only names and swords. In King's Landing, Robb tried to rule, but he was no king. Not really. Not in the way they wanted. He kept the court small. He executed traitors quickly. He refused a crown. "I'm not my father," he told Sansa one night, staring into the hearth. "Can't, I'm sure as hell not, Robert." Sansa, now a quiet shadow of the girl she once was, nodded. "You're not," she whispered. "But you're all we have." She had changed too. The court had stripped the softness from her. Her eyes no longer pleaded. They watched, calculated, learned. And while the lords mocked her behind closed doors, Robb began listening to her counsel more than any Maester, because she knew the games they played. She had survived them. From the wall came silence. The last raven had arrived weeks ago. "Darkness walks," it read, and then nothing. Jon Snow had vanished beyond the wall, leading a party of rangers north toward rumors of wildlings uniting behind a new leader. But no message returned. No sign, only wind, and a cold that crept farther south each day. Some nights in the Red Keep, Robb dreamed of Jon. He saw him standing on ice, sword burning in his hand, facing shadows that screamed without mouths. He always woke before Jon moved. Before the battle began. One morning, as the snow fell thicker than ever in the capital, Sansa stood on the balcony and watched crows circle the city like vultures. "When does winter end?" she asked Maester Pylos. He didn't answer. Because it wasn't going to end, not this one. The people began to call it. The season of Four Kings. Ned, Robb Stannis, and the girl with dragons they hadn't even seen yet. But it wouldn't stay four, because in the north, Ramsay Bolton began calling himself Warden of the North. In the Westerlands, Kevin Lannister, desperate to reclaim glory, declared Lannisport a freehold under House Lannister's gold. And in the Stormlands, Gendry, Robert's bastard, hidden for years in the slums of Flea Bottom, had been found. Raised by the Red Woman, armored by Stannis, and now crowned by fire as the King of Ash and Iron. He had Robert's hammer. He had Rhalla's blessing, and he had an army of fanatics behind him. The wind in King's Landing changed. It blew colder, harsher. Not the cold of winter, it was older than that, deeper. The kind of cold that sunk into your bones and made even steel feel soft. The Maesters said it was just the shifting seasons, but the ravens said otherwise. From Eastwatch by the sea came the first scream. A single bird, feathers bloodied, arrived with no message, just a torn scrap of black cloak tied around its leg. Then came the silence. The wall had gone dark. No ravens from Castle Black. No riders from Moles Town. No word from Jon Snow or the rangers who'd gone into the haunted forest. The north was blind, deaf, waiting for a sound that would never come. Until one night. It came. A single horn, blown from the gates of Winterfell. 3 long blasts, white walkers. Robb Stark heard it in a dream before the raven arrived. His father's voice, cold, distant, whispered across a snow-swept field. "The long night has come again, and you are not ready." When he awoke, the fire in his chamber had gone out. The coals were dead, and his breath fogged the air like he stood atop the wall itself. The raven arrived hours later. Winterfell had fallen, again. This time, not to men. Rose Bolton was dead. Ramsay vanished. Every soul in the Dreadfort slaughtered. No blood. No wounds, just frozen like statues, like echoes of what they used to be. The council in the Red Keep was no longer about kings and claims. Now it was about survival. Varys placed a map of the north on the war table. Snow covered most of it. The rest was marked in black wax. Castles that no longer sent ravens. Villages that had gone silent. "They're not fighting each other anymore," he said. "The Northmen have stopped. The wildlings have vanished. Even the Ironborn have pulled back to sea." Robb said nothing. Because what was there to say? The real war had finally arrived. Then came the second storm. Not of ice, but of fire. Daenerys Targaryen's dragons landed on Westeros. She didn't wait, didn't parley, didn't kneel. She took Dragonstone in a single night. No siege, no resistance. The castle remembered its blood, and the dragons remembered the sky. The next morning, every raven in the Reach carried the same message: bend the knee or burn. Robb sent a peace envoy. 3 lords, 1 maester, and a letter written in his own hand. None returned, not even their bones. "I have no love for Stannis," Daenerys said to her blood riders, "but at least he names his enemies." She saw Robb Stark as worse than a usurper. He had taken the throne in the name of peace and delivered only blood. He had worn the crown with no birthright, no claim, and worst of all, no fire. To her, that was unforgivable, and so she flew. The first sighting came over the Blackwater. The sun vanished for 3 heartbeats. A shadow passed over the city. Children screamed. Old men wept, and Drogon landed on the tower of the great sept of Baelor and roared fire into the sky, not to burn, to warn. Daenerys was here, and she was watching. Inside the Red Keep, Robb watched from the battlements. "She doesn't want the throne," Sansa said, standing beside him. "She wants vengeance. She wants fire." "No," Robb replied. "She wants what she thinks is hers." He didn't blink as Drogon took off again, wings blotting the moon, and she'll burn the world to get it. Stannis was already preparing for war. In the Stormlands, he forged new alliances with the surviving lords of the Reach. Gendry marched beside him, Robert's bastard now clad in black and red, the stag and flaming heart stitched onto his breastplate. The Red Woman named him the Hammer Reborn. And in a cave near Storm's End, Melisandre claimed she had seen the enemy's true face, not the girl with dragons, not the boy with the crown, not even the lion or the kraken, her voice echoed. "The darkness wears no name. It only hungers." Then the 4th storm came, the worst of them all. The wall fell. The sound echoed across the world. Scream of ice shattering, of magic breaking, of something old waking for the last time. It collapsed not in pieces but in dust, and through that dust walked an army, silent, endless. The Night King had crossed. Ravens failed. Messengers disappeared. The land between Winterfell and the Neck turned into dead air. No one came south. Not anymore. Only death. The last word from the north came from Deepwood Motte, a single sentence. "We are not alone in the dark." Robb called a council of every major house still loyal to the realm. House Tully, House Arryn, House Velaryon. Even a representative from the Iron Bank arrived, because even gold cannot survive winter, but the Tyrells refused to come. The Lannisters had locked themselves inside Casterly Rock, and Daenerys had not responded. Robb stood before the map of Westeros, hands shaking not from fear but from the weight. "We can't win this war in pieces," he said. "We must unite." Varys stepped forward. "Then you must give her what she wants." Sansa said nothing, but her face said everything. The next raven Robb sent was simple: parley, Dragonstone. 1 week. Daenerys answered with fire. Daenerys answered with fire. Dragonstone was silent when Robb arrived. No banners flew. No horns greeted him. The black cliff stood like jagged teeth against the sky, and the sea beat against the rocks as if it wanted to warn him. "You are not welcome here." He came without an army. Just a handful of Stark men and Sansa beside him. No gold, no gifts, no hostages. Only a simple truth carried in his heart. The living needed to stand together. Daenerys did not come down to greet him. They waited 6 hours, and then the doors opened. She sat on the throne of her ancestors with firelight behind her, and Drogon curled near the hall like a shadow with wings. Her silver hair gleamed. Her eyes did not. "You come with no crown," she said, voice calm but sharp. "You sit the Iron Throne, and yet you do not wear the symbol of it." Why? Robb didn't bow. He didn't kneel. He didn't answer like a courtier. "I never wanted it," he said. "I only wanted to stop a worse king from taking it. Now I just want to stop the dead." Daenerys stood. "And yet the fire waits because of you." Her voice rose, controlled but full of fury. "You let my family burn. You helped Robert. You called my father mad, my brother a threat, and now you call yourself peace." "I called myself nothing," Robb said, "but I know what's coming. And if we don't stand together, there won't be a throne left to fight over." Sansa stepped forward. "You're angry. You should be. But if you think fire can save you from what's coming from the north, then you're no better than Cersei." The room stilled. Drogon growled. But Daenerys didn't flinch. She stared at Sansa, and then finally sat back down. "My army will march north," she said, "but I will not kneel. I will not forget. And when the dead are dust, we will talk about who truly deserves to rule." Robb nodded once. Fair. The alliance was uneasy, but it was real, and not a moment too. Soon the Night King had passed the neck moat. Kaelin had fallen without resistance. The ruins of Winterfell froze over, now crawling with blue-eyed horrors. Direwolves turned, old gods forgotten, the heart tree blackened and silent, and now the dead reached the south. Robb and Daenerys rode side by side for the first time just south of the Trident. Their combined armies stretched across the plain, Dothraki screamers beside Stark bannermen, dragons circling above while archers of the Vale waited below. It should have been impossible, and yet here they were, the fire and the ice. Jon Snow returned on the eve of battle, not the boy who went to the wall, not the bastard who questioned every step. He came back silent, changed, older in the eyes. There was something in him now, not just purpose, but sorrow. He stood before Robb without speaking, and Robb, seeing him alive, pulled him into an embrace so fierce it nearly broke the silence. "I thought you were dead," Jon whispered. "So did I." They spoke that night in the command tent. Just the three of them, Robb, Jon, Daenerys. Jon explained what the Night King was, what he saw, what he felt. He spoke of Hardhome, of the wall falling, of the children they found turned to ice, of the way the White Walkers never spoke, just watched like death itself, waiting to collect its due. "They don't want the realm," he said. "They want to end it." And then he turned to Daenerys. "They fear your dragons." The final plan was laid. The Dothraki would ride ahead, drawing out the main force. Archers and spears would wait in layered defense. Dragonfire would be held in reserve, to strike the White Walkers directly. And the three, Robb, Jon, Daenerys, would ride into battle together, the last hope of the living. The Battle of the Trident was never supposed to happen again. But it did. Only this time no man claimed victory. The sky turned black with storm. The snow fell sideways. The wind screamed, and from the trees came silence, then footsteps, then death. The first charge failed. Dothraki screams were swallowed by darkness. Horses froze mid-gallop. Men fell to the earth without wounds, only ice bursting in their lungs. Jon fought like a ghost. His sword, Longclaw, burned blue with each strike, shattering wights by the dozens. Daenerys burned them from the sky. Drogon screamed flame that melted the ground, and Robb stood in the shield wall beside his men, fighting with northern steel and his father's name echoing in his heart. But the Night King did not come for war. He came for ending. He stepped onto the battlefield without sound. He raised his arms, and the dead rose again. Dothraki, Northmen, even dragons burned and broken, now turned. Then he saw them, Jon, Daenerys, Robb, and he pointed his hand. A spear of ice flew through the air. Robb turned, and Drogon roared. The spear missed Daenerys, but not Robb. It hit his chest deep, straight through the wolf sigil on his armor. He dropped to his knees. The world spun. Jon screamed. Daenerys froze, but Robb looked at them and smiled. "I kept it together," he whispered, and then fell. The battle turned in that moment. Drogon unleashed a firestorm so fierce it melted hundreds. Jon charged the Night King alone, blade flashing, and Arya. Yes, Arya was there too, hidden, waiting like a whisper in the trees. She struck the Night King in silence, a single dagger of dragonglass, straight to the chest. He shattered, and the dead with him. The silence after was louder than the war. Robb Stark was buried beside his father. No crown, no fanfare, just a single stone. The king who didn't want the throne. Jon vanished after. Some said he returned to the north. Others claimed he joined the free folk. Daenerys took the throne but never smiled on it. She ruled with fire. But not fury, because she had seen what fury brought. The long night ended. But the scars it left would never heal. Not in the land, not in the people, and not in the halls where wolves once walked. Wolves once walked.